Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brand Innovators Livecast series. My name is Diana Dilworth. I'm the managing editor here at Brand Innovators. Welcome to today's international livecast on women in marketing. Today is really special. We've got a great lineup of marketers, a phenomenal event, including speakers from MasterCard Europe, AB InBev, and Nestle. We'd like to thank all our marketers for taking the time to speak and present here today. And we'd like to give a big shout out to our sponsors for making this possible. And we'd also like to thank you, the audience, for tuning in and taking the time to be here with us today. Remember, we're live. The Q&A widget at the bottom of the screen can be used to ask questions. We'll get to them at the end of each session. The chat widget is there too. It's just for our audience and listeners at home. You can use that to connect with attendees and discuss the event in real time. I'd love to welcome to the stage our first group of speakers. We have Jeanette Liendo, who's the SVP of Marketing at MasterCard Europe, and Nina Ramatala, the SVP of Client Experience at WPP. Please welcome them to the stage for our first session. Hi, Nina.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks very much for having me. And I hope Jeanette's beaming herself in as we speak.
Yes, I think she is. I know in the background, she was on there. So I'm sure we'll get into it. And so Nina, where are you based?
I'm joining you today from London. I actually have a wonderful view looking out over the River Thames on the South Bank here in London.
Oh, lovely.
Sights from here, which is very nice.
Fantastic. How's the weather there today?
Grey.
Typical November London day, huh?
Yeah, we are in the UK, so yeah, it's great. It's been quite mild actually, but yeah. And you?
Oh, that's nice. I am in Bern, Switzerland, so we also have some gray, but today it's actually been quite sunny, so it's nice. Nice day for getting a little sunshine in the window. Just got a message that Jeanette's going to be joining us shortly. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and your role at WPP?
Thank you. Well, so I am Senior Vice President of Client Experience here at WPP, which basically means helping our clients to get the best of WPP, which is a very big and wonderful business with lots of different parts to it. And, you know, as a woman in marketing, I think this is an important topic for me, but actually I'm also a coach. So, and I particularly spend time with women who are stepping into leadership roles for the first time. So this took, you know, for many reasons, my own career, my role now, but also the coaching that I've done and things like that. This is just such an important topic. So I'm delighted to be here today.
Yes, it's so important. Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And what are some of the things that you advise women when they're stepping into leadership roles for the first time?
Well, good question. One of the most common things that I work on with people is making sure that they do that authentically and in their own way, true to their own values, because quite often, in my own experience, actually getting very personal very quickly, but never mind, was that perhaps through observing role models in the past that, you know, that have a different way of being to me. My first leadership experience was I was being somebody else. And not my true authentic self. And it's taken me a good 5 years to work out really what my leadership values are and what that means for how I show up authentically, rather than trying to be the leader I thought I should be, because that's what I'd seen and the stereotypes that, you know, we've all seen historically. So that would be what I'd tell you about that.
Oh, how did you make that discovery, and how did you, you know, change? Like, what made you feel like you needed to change, and it was you weren't showing up authentically? I mean,
I think getting quite a lot of you know, that chatter you get in your mind when something hasn't quite gone the way you would like it to, and you start giving yourself a hard time, probably probably a harder time than anyone else is going to give you, certainly in my experience. And then going, okay, actually, I don't feel something's not quite right. There's a tension between how I am being and how I want to be and how I feel about myself. And so that's why getting to your values, I think, is just so important and transformational in a lot of the experiences I've witnessed as well as my own. So you really know yourself and you know what's right for you, and when you're on your values and when you're off your values, and then you can notice it. And I can see a question: have I got a coach? Yes. I really advise it. I really, really advise it, whether that's a formal coach or just somebody to talk to that's very good at listening as much as anything else. And I can see another question, which is, what are my values? Creativity, commitment, grace. Those are probably the three. Action, I'm very action focused, so I'd say those are the four that I think about the most. Am I being as creative as possible? Am I showing up with grace, and love? Bit of a shortage of that in the world, maybe.
I was talking to somebody yesterday who was saying that she was giving it actually advice for a story we're doing about women in marketing. And she was talking about, you have to love what you're doing, because if you don't love it, it's going to show up, your excitement and enthusiasm for the work you're doing. And if you're not doing work you love, then you should switch and find the work that you love, because otherwise people are going to see it.
It oozes out of you. It's a bit like, whether you like it or not. It oozes out of you as a human being. We can't hide those things. The unspoken is powerful and can be very loud, even when we're trying to hide it. Jeanette, hello.
Absolutely.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties on my side.
No problem whatsoever. Welcome, Jeanette. I will let you two take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tiana.
Now, Jeanette, first of all, hopefully you're not feeling too stressed. I'm very pleased to see you. And you've got a second to take a deep breath, because we've got a very important topic to talk about today, haven't we? And I know also a topic very close to your heart. So why don't we start, I think, to give us the context, because you've had an absolutely fascinating career. I know that. To give the audience some context, why don't you talk us through your journey today, and then I'd really like to dive into a couple of key moments in your career journey, and understand those further. So tell us how you got here.
Thank you, and as always, Nina, it's always such a pleasure to connect. It's lovely to see you.
Yeah.
So I'm originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and when I was 2, I went to live in Canada, which is the accent you hear in English. And when I was 9, I went to live in Mexico City. And then when I was 11, up until the age of about 17, I lived on the border of southern Switzerland, northern Italy. And I studied a lot of art history there, because that's what you did in school. And then I went my last couple of years to the US for school. And then I went back to Argentina, and I started my career with a college professor, actually, at IBM in research and analytics. And from there, I got hired into Oracle to do communications, and eventually became the head of Latin America marketing. And so was based out of Miami. Then I was sent into sales in Palo Alto at the headquarters, and I ran North America sales. And at that time, I was lucky enough to set up some call centers in Bangalore, which was a mind-blowing experience for me. I learned so much there. And then I went back to Latin America with Microsoft with a condition I could come back to Europe, because I really missed it. And I've been here ever since, doing either global roles or regional roles for marketing and communications, especially with digital. Spent a little bit of time in Philips as well, Philips Healthcare, and now I'm at MasterCard.
A really fascinating journey. And I think the thing that's particularly clear in the story you just told is the number of different countries and cultures that you have lived in and before you started your career and when you were growing up, but also during your career. I mean, Argentina, Canada, Mexico, Switzerland, Italy, US were the ones I wrote down. So tell me, which culture did you enjoy the most and which challenged you the most?
Well, I do think I think that time in Italy really formed me, and I didn't realize it then. But I went to school where on the weekends, the school would give teachers gas money if they took students to youth hostels and took them on journeys with them. So I was able to see Venice, and I was able to see Florence, and sail in different parts of Europe, and that gave me a natural lust for life and just how interesting and all the layers that Europe has that really stayed with me. And I didn't realize really until much later how much I loved it and how much I missed it. And so sometimes in life, the things that you're passionate about, they don't occur very explicitly. You realize them after, in a way. And I think in terms of challenge, because I've moved around 20 times by the time I worked at Microsoft, I was very shocked to be culture shocked during my first trip to China. I didn't think of myself as the kind of person who would ever be culture shocked. And I realized how small my world was and how I was missing half the planet's history and culture and just a million things. And so it wasn't the Chinese or anything that I found intimidating. It was my complete lack of knowledge. And because I'm a technology nerd and an art nerd, I connected that way back to China. I tried to understand the business context for technology, and I tried to understand the history and the art, which I still love today. But whenever I can, to this day, whenever I get to go anywhere in Asia, anywhere in China, anywhere in Japan, anywhere all over the continent, I go there because it makes me feel small and it takes me out of my comfort zone. But I come back so full of things that I would never have imagined. So I would have never learned them, And
that's so interesting, isn't it? That your experience there was actually about realizing or shining a light on some things that you didn't know. So sort of widening your Johari's window actually beyond what you knew. And that was uncomfortable because you know so much about different cultures, right? So, and actually your response to that, to lean in and spend more time and really push yourself to learn in that discomfort zone or outside of your comfort zone, I think is interesting and very inspiring. So let's go to the first role you had in your career, because I know we have talked about this before, and I think it's very interesting. And particularly interesting for those young women at the beginning of their career now, watching this, or people who are mentoring, managing, coaching, even people at the start of their career. I know that you, your very first role, you were the only woman in the team, and in fact, I think the only woman in the building. Is that right? Going back to Argentina, aren't we here? I think. To talk a bit about that and your experience and how you coped with that.
Well, I think my father has been a very formative person in my life. When he met my mother, for example, he paid for her she was going to get married, and he paid for her to get an education, to become a medical doctor, to become a psychiatrist, and to become a psychoanalyst. And ever since then, they've written about 30 books together. So I grew up with a role model of a woman who was very instrumented and educated, but confident in what she did. And at the same time, my father really fought. He led all the activism to get women into the university at that time when he was younger. So not everybody has the luxury of having a father who's a women's rights champion, but I think the insight is shareable. And what he always taught me was the one thing you can control in your career is your performance. And so, for example, they were quite free as parents, but every Saturday he would teach me to swim competitively, because when you swim, you can't afford to look to the right or left. You have to, you lose the race because it's so few seconds. So he would try to just get me to really focus on what I could control and perform. And a few months ago, I had the privilege of interviewing Ada Hegerberg, who's the woman footballer who's the first woman to ever receive the Ballon d'Or. And she said it very clearly, no performance, no voice. So she continues playing at the level she's at, so she has a platform to be an activist for women. And I think that's very, very important. So in Argentina, a lot of women worked by the time I started, but not in high technology. And so, but because I'd been so driven by my dad to perform, I didn't focus on that so much. I focused more on just delivering and performing. And at the same time, and I think my mother had a big role in this as well, she taught me how to be comfortable in being a leader in my own way. So not being a leader by becoming like everyone else in the room who was very alpha male, but being myself, but being the first one to jump in if there's a problem, being the person who tries to solve it, assuming I know what I'm talking about, right? But I think that's very important to be yourself, to be a leader in a way that's natural to your personality, but at the same time to be thought of, to be top of mind as a problem solver. Because I think we can all be leaders, no matter what title we have, but it's that power to jump in that's very, very important. And what I would say to women on the call who are just starting their career is, less so nowadays, but one thing they might hear is that women can be emotional at work. And I would say to take that with a pinch of salt, because, for example, some emotions like enthusiasm are a superpower. What more do you want than to work with someone that listens to you and, champions you and is enthusiastic, right? So expressing things that can be inclusive and that can be positive are important. And we all do it in our different ways and in our different personalities, but making sure you have a voice. So performance, but finding a way to have a voice in there is important.
And your own voice. I mean, you covered so much in that, which is so powerful. Be leadership in your own authentic way. The fact that everybody can lead. Leadership isn't just for the people at the top of the organization, is it? And actually, emotion being a superpower, not something to be looked down on, if it's harnessed and shared in the right way. And I actually particularly love something you said at the beginning of that, which was focus on what you can control as well. But it's very easy, isn't it, to get caught up in, well, they said they're doing that, well, this is happening over there, and what's this? And actually, what's in your gift is the only thing that's really worth spending your energy on, isn't it? So that's your, so if you think about where you are today and your role now, what would you say are the things that you really are your superpowers as a woman in marketing? Your secret to success?
Well, I think something I learned a bit early on, for me, and it might not work for everyone, was to differentiate being a good manager to being a leader. which, you know, like we just discussed, anyone really can be a leader. There's so many situations where people who have the least give the most, and you know, that can be extremely compelling. And I do think it's very important that you know yourself, and that you know what you do well and what you have an ease for, and you know the areas you're not strong in, and build muscle there, whether it's budgeting or planning or whatever it is. But I think that the table stakes is being a very strong operational manager, even in marketing. But from there you lead. And I think what works for me is, once in that operational space, is giving a lot of room to other people who do it better than you do, whatever it is, budgeting, planning, media, whatever it is that's better than you. But in the strategy, having a very clear idea of where you want to go, where you want to arrive at. In my case, it's the visual look and feel, and it's the message of a campaign I'm doing. I think sometimes I can be very easygoing, but about that, I don't negotiate. It really needs to be what my mind's eye has seen, and not negotiate on the message, not add or detract. And I think one element of marketing that is very also purposeful is to do something that has meaning. So to champion something, or to talk about topics that are a little risky, because you're trying to do the right thing. Like my father, who led the riots to have women in the university, right? You can do that in certain brands. And so I think one caveat is, in what you can control your performance, but you can also, once you get established in your career and you have a little bit more degrees of freedom, you can also choose the environment to work in up to a point, or you can at least see what environments are not for you, because having opportunities as well, and having leaders who are leaders matter. So I think I've been quite lucky to work at brands that have allowed me to see that, and to know, you know, what works and what's not. But you do have to stand up for certain things and not negotiate as well.
Yeah, and I think that I like the build on knowing yourself, but knowing what environments you thrive in and which environments you don't, or cultures you thrive in. You know, not every organization is going to be a great fit for every individual in the same way, right? Or every role or every team. Tell me a bit more about, you know, we talked a bit about this last time we met, but the difference between, as a marketer, the difference between being a good marketer and a great one, in your opinion?
I think a great one is one that can really leave you with an idea that's compelling, and that can hit you in a place that's meaningful. And that could be intellectual, that could be emotional, that could be societal, but it leaves you with an almost a mnemonic impression that makes you think about something powerful. And it's quite an art to be that straightforward, because, like you said, you can get distracted with many different things. You could execute in media 500 different ways, but it's that purity of the idea and staying very clear to that. And then giving the degrees of freedom that I think is very important. I work a lot with film, and so I think it's very similar. It's like being a director, writer of a piece. You know, you have amazing performers who go and deliver it, but the plot is the plot, and the look and feel is the look and feel. I mean, we remember Stanley Kubrick's movies for a reason, right? So that clarity is important, and then also knowing when to step back and what areas aren't yours, and where people can shine. You have to have both, and it's not easy, but I think that's what separates the great ones from
the good ones.
Yeah.
That purity of idea requires real commitment, doesn't it? And bravery too. Yeah.
I think it's almost an exercise in design, like very simplistic, like a Zaha Hadid moment. Like, what is the look you want? Like the idea, the purity of the message. It's really very hard, very, very hard.
But something you love, and now I'm going to make the connection back to actually what you studied as your passion when you were in Italy, right? Or so, that it's kind of comes full circle, doesn't it? Some of this.
Well, yes, and also, I mean, because we were in Italy, we would study that. It was one of the curriculums, and it was just another class. But I didn't realize how much I would love it for the rest of my life. And sometimes and it happens with my kids, trying to introduce them to something naturally, like organically. And, those field trips we would take with the professors who needed the money to get to the weekend or whatever, and we'd stay in youth hostels, and we'd just see a city like Siena. That left an impression my whole life. And no one was teaching me in a book, and I didn't have to do homework, and I didn't have to take a test on it, but I loved it. And now with hindsight and with a bit more reflection, I know that that's what I love. And so I found myself in marketing, and especially in brand marketing roles, but now I know I love that. So now I look for it. And I also think my time in research, my time in PR, all of that served me well. And so one thing, and I hear this a lot from filmmakers saying to film students, is when you're starting out, try to do many different roles, because it doesn't mean you're going to go 500 ways in your career, but having that different knowledge of the different elements, especially in marketing, that makes it a lot more powerful, because you'll be able one day, if you manage and lead people, you'll be able to understand what they do and give them that space. And at the same time, your idea will be much richer, because it'll have more dimensions. Yeah. And so I think that's really important.
It's great advice. Somebody recently said to me, think about your career sort of trajectory, less like a linear like this, and much more like a jungle gym, where you're, especially in the early years of your career building, to build that experience. And tell me, so just sort of building on that advice, I know we've talked about role models before, haven't we? And there are more role models now for women in marketing than there were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, definitely. But I know you've also got a particular point of view around role models and oneself, haven't you?
Yes, I do. Well, and also, I mean, some of my role models were brilliant women, but they sacrificed a lot to be leaders when I was in college, and I was looking up to them. And I think it's very important to be inner directed, and to be your own role model when you can. And what I mean by that is there's people who are very inspiring, and you should absolutely learn from them, but you should find your own leadership style, because I think we have a lot more control of how people perceive us and how much impact we can have than we realize, especially early in our careers. And I think something I had a gift by accident through my father and my mother, that I'd be the first one to jump in if there was a problem. And again, you need to know what you're talking about, because if you're jumping in all the time and you don't know what you're doing, that doesn't help the situation. But if you do know what you're doing and you have something to say, I think it's vitally important, especially for women, to not wait to be asked. Be the person that people think about when they have a problem, because that will let you have a jungle gym experience that's so much richer than being the most pleasant person and always there and always serviceable, but in a position that you're not leading, you're following. And it's the same person. It's just a little bit of a shift of, being there when people need you. And also in life, not only in business, being there when people need you, that moment they will always remember. So I think of course there's great role models, and we have them both in men and women and in all parts of society and business and marketing, but don't leave yourself out of that equation. There's a lot more you can do than you realize, and sometimes it takes you a lot longer, a lot of life years to get to that point, and it shouldn't. It's a little secret you can have up front.
Brilliant advice, absolutely brilliant. I'm sure Diana will come back in a minute, because there'll be questions, but I've actually one question, just slightly changing tack, all in the same theme, of course. If we think about the industry, our industry, marketing industry, obviously the picture is improving, and there are more and more women in marketing all the time, albeit there's still not enough at the senior levels in particular. What do you think is the next thing that needs to change or be focused on more with that, and as we continue to make progress on this topic?
Well, I think gender bias is still absolutely with us, and it's not only the men. And I think that was my biggest eye opener is women sometimes not appreciating other women's talents, even though they've been able to succeed thanks to other women and other men. I think we have to be aware of our own biases, because it's very, very tricky not to realize you also have biases when things once world is normal, because you're perceiving it. But you have to really go there and really test it. And so fighting that is very important, addressing that, talking about that, and helping people out, and being a safe place for someone to go to when they have an issue, finding mentors who you can talk to in that moment about that, which is a specific kind of knowledge. The other thing, of course, is equality, gender pay, being equally paid for. And that is one thing I think after a point in your career, once you're up on your skis and you can pay your rent and whatnot, that you should really look at, is your company paying equally? Because that's something that I think also we can vote with our talent on. It's been a while now, so enough is enough, and that's important, and that's something that I think if for people who have that choice, to make that choice. And then the last thing is the next generation, Girls for Tech, for example. It's a program we do to get girls into STEM, and I mean, many of the brands I've worked with do things like this, but in the case of MasterCard, we have about 6,000 employees who are constantly mentoring women to get girls to get into technology, especially technology, and to feel comfortable and to not be intimidated sometimes by other women, frankly. Or by people they're growing up with. These are girls.
So 6,000 people inside the business that are mentoring people outside the business or inside the business, or both? Probably both.
So we have a program called Girls for Tech that we support. It's an initiative to get young girls into technology. And over the last couple of years, we've had 6,000 MasterCard employees go and mentor the girls and teach them and be part of the course and run the courses. And I think we've reached something like 1.5 million girls at this point. and we want to go to 5 million by 2025. But it's that next generation. So we help each other out now, but what comes next, building a wave, so to speak, a Mexican wave of women in tech.
Yeah, that is amazing. I've written that down. I'm definitely taking that away from this. We've got another question here, which is, I absolutely love this question. Jeanette, what is your bigger game? Do you have a North Star goal for your future from here?
Well, I've always been quite intuitive. And I always also try to balance my life with work and home and experiences. And I don't see them as separate. And so, I'm a workaholic, but I'm a very happy workaholic because I love all of my life. And of course, there's moments that it's not so easy. I'm not trying to pretend it's not, but it's, I think what's very, very important for me is being able to create and to have a platform that drives change for good. And so my, inclusion and the environment are really my bigger goals. For my children, for myself, for everyone I work with and care about, and anything that leads me to that. And that always has been increasingly more and more. I've kind of been self-selected into the marketing role, but I don't know if that's my whole journey either. Yeah. There could be something more societal in my future. There might be something combined. And I'm in a little bit of a unique situation that in MasterCard, our CEO, our previous CEO, Ajay, created what's called doing well by doing good. So instead of doing well business-wise and doing good through CSR, you try to drive inclusion, financial inclusion, helping small, medium businesses, helping women in tech or whatever, girls or whatever, in the business line. So not separate. And so I do feel quite lucky to have the opportunity that if I want to do something bigger in the environment, I can in my role. And I realize that is very lucky. So it's not everybody has that opportunity, but more and more, I think there's more brands out there that give you the opportunity to follow your bigger kind of philosophy, North Star, not only your next career step. And I would always keep an eye on that because it's a bigger part of life the older you get to have a meaningful one. So if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And I think I more and more brands and businesses are doing what you're already doing at MasterCard, which is integrating, looking after people, planet, society, communities into the day-to-day business and activity that they're, an activation that they're taking out to the world through their brand, so that, it's not a separate thing. It's definitely not a tick box. It's really, so I think, that you're, obviously you're quite ahead of the game on that in some ways, but that is happening, definitely, that shift to it being part of the fabric of the core business more and more, which is good. One more, hopefully we've got time for one more question. I'm going to squeeze one more in anyway, which is, so some people hate the term work-life balance. Some people use the term work-life blending, whichever language you'd like to use. How do you maintain that sense of balance and your whole self inside work, but also outside of work?
Well, a couple of years ago, I had the very odd opportunity for my husband and I to go to a headhunter at the same time, and we both got analyzed by that Myers-Briggs wheel. Oh,
yeah.
But we did it at the same time, and he's also a marketer. But he's a data scientist. He's like a deep data nerd, and I'm like the brand, and we learned. I learned that I was an extrovert and he was an introvert, and that he took in a lot of sense perception during the day and then relaxed by going out at night. And a people person. I get like all excited and I give all my energy during the day, and at night I like to relax. And so that was something that I use a lot as a tool to know when I'm starting to hit a wall, because I'm very demanding with myself and I love doing my work, so I could do it forever, you know. But I also love my children. I could stay with them for 7 days a week. So it's I just like what I do, but the day only has so many hours. And so knowing when I'm getting to that limit and I'm starting to feel like I'm starting to run on empty, and then prioritizing. One of the best things I ever did in my life for my career was get pregnant, because I had to prioritize for the first time.
That's interesting.
Cold turkey. I did 3 things and not 10, and I was going to do them well. And so I think those 2 things, knowing, you know, what gives you energy and how you need to recuperate, and then being able to prioritize. So you do the big stuff and not try to do everything, especially as women, where we're expected to do everything all the time. Is really, really important.
Knowing, and even down on the energy piece, even down to listing, if you're struggling, and listing what's giving you or does give you energy and what's draining your energy, and then reevaluating how you're spending your time is just such valuable use of half an hour it's worth doing. So yeah, I love that. And last one, and then I think that Diana will rejoin us. So when you how was it taking your first pregnancy and coming back into the business? That's a sort of a landmark's the right word either, but that's a critical moment in a woman's career typically. And you know, my personal view is not one that organizations always get right. What was your experience, and have you got any advice on that? It's a critical moment in time.
Well, because I'm an optimist, I thought I'd never had 3 months off. I planned to move house the same time I gave birth to my first child.
Okay.
I remember sitting with my son, who was like 3 weeks old, surrounded by boxes, thinking, oh my God, this is mad. But I dealt with it. It helped me lose some baby weight. You know, I got through it. But I was lucky. I was working at Microsoft, which already had quite an enlightened policy, and my husband could take 2 weeks off. He was also working there. So it was something that helped tremendously at that moment. And you really feel, you know, your entire body, your cognitive style, the way you perceive the world, everything changes when you have your first child, more than physiologically, more than you think. And so being at a place that can give you that space is very, very important. But I was able to get back in quite easily because, you know, I like the variety. I like the variety of being with my child, and then solving for a campaign that was unsolvable, whatever it was. I think one thing though that I have seen, and we have a program for that, which is Relaunch Your Career. It's especially designed for parents who have taken years off, a couple of years off after having a child. And there it can be very, very, very tricky to come back.
Yeah.
And it's on both sides. People perceive you that you're kind of out of the game or whatever it is, wrongly, but that's the perception. And people self-perceive themselves that they're not completely sure. And so it's a very vulnerable moment. And so bridging that gap, I think, is also something to have an eye out for and to help people through. And we do it in different ways. People can do it individually when they're coming back, or, you know, more dramatically if they take time out and they're having a hard time re-engaging.
Yeah, totally. Very good. Well, I mean, that is what I take from that in particular, is maintaining a good sense of humor is something that you did, but also having support and being able to ask for support from those around you at home as well. Which is important. Anyway, so I can see Diana's rejoined us. So as somebody said in the chat, you are remarkable. you know.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nina.
Um,
Fantastic conversation, you guys. It really raised a lot of great points. Particularly, it's very important conversation that, of course, we're having in companies continually about maternity leave, but also I was speaking to a senior executive yesterday at Diageo, speaking of the importance of paternity leave to help, within the family balance. Maybe the dad stays home and the woman can stay at work, or you can both do it and shift it around so that everyone's careers can still, be supported, and that it's okay. And we're seeing more companies offering these more generous plans, which I think is the way to change the culture, and excellent. Well, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us today. It was a really great conversation and we appreciate you being here. So the next conversation is going to be between Melissa Hughes, who's the Senior Director of Brand Marketing at the Founders Table, and Ariel Russo, who is our Director of Content and Community here at Brand Innovators. And I know Ryan is going to be teeing this up for us, and I will just hang tight and we will get that going.
Amazing. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in today. We have a truly exciting session for you all, but before we begin, I'll start with who I am and why I'm here. I'm Ariel Russo, and I lead community efforts here for Brand Innovators, and a huge part of this rewarding role means I get the opportunity to work with the most incredible, innovative, and inspiring leaders of today. Which brings me to our purpose for this session. Today, we will welcome thought leader and marketing expert Melissa Hughes to the stage. Melissa is the Senior Director of Brand Marketing for Founders Table, representing two of our favorite food brands, Chopped and Dos Toros. So please join us as we dive into Melissa's incredible marketing journey, her new role in the restaurant industry, and of course, a few surprises and insights along the way. Let's begin. Hello, Melissa.
Hey, thank you so much for having me today.
Amazing. Well, let's go to the first question. You have an extensive and impressive background with very well-known brands from Unilever, Henkel, and L'Oreal. Can you dive into your CPG journey and, of course, the series of events that led you to your new and exciting role with Founders Table?
Yes, so I've spent my last roughly 10 years in the CPG industry, beginning my career at Unilever as a part of their Unilever Future Leaders Program, which was where I can definitely say I gained my foundation, doing everything from global digital marketing at Ben & Jerry's, hopping over to India to work on Lipton tea, and really being able to bring the launch of dry spray deodorant to life with Dove, Degree, and Axe as a part of the master brand team. And most recently, spending time at L'Oreal as a part of their multicultural beauty division and having the dynamic opportunity to restage, rebrand, and breathe new life into the Dark and Lovely brand, which is so close to my heart, and loving to continue to see that brand flourish. And now hopping over to combine my passion for food with my love for marketing here at Founders Table.
That is so exciting. So tell us more about what your role looks like, and more so, what most attracts you about working with delicious brands like Chopped and Dos Toros?
For me, what drove me to this decision to really take on not only a new industry, but some new, very loved East Coast brands was really the combination of I have a food page on Instagram. I'm a foodie all the time. I love exploring new places. And how can I do that and bring it to life for fast casual restaurants in a space, in a sector, and a time where people are taking the love for experiential with the quick and amazing food delivery that you get from a place like Chopped, and bring it to life and expand it. It's in a Founders Table is in a growth mode, and Chopped is in a growth mode. And so exciting to continue to open new restaurants in new cities and bring the love and creativity of salad everywhere.
I love that. So what is your Instagram handle, just so everyone can go and follow you?
Yeah, it's the Chef Melly on Instagram, bringing to life what's for dinner around every day. Not so consistent with content, but almost every day, with new fun recipes.
Amazing. We'll have to drop that again at the end of the chat so everyone knows where to follow you. In your current role right now, in your day-to-day position, what about your role do you like the most?
My favorite part of this new journey has been definitely tasting food at 10 a.m. on Wednesdays, having the opportunity to sit with our chefs from our food and beverage team, learn about the different spices and ingredients and unique proposition that makes us unique. When I think about Chopped and I think about everything that I've learned in the past few weeks from the founders is that they are not only involved, but they're ingrained and they believe that better tastes better, and they're going to continue to strive to bring better ingredients, bold flavors, and more creative salads into the marketplace every single day.
What an exciting role where you get to taste and innovate at the same time.
Yes.
So what learnings do you think that you can take from your experience in the CPG space that will most contribute to your success in the restaurant industry? So in other words, what ways does CPG do it well, and how can you translate that success to both Chopped and Dos Toros?
CPG is comprised of so many, what I can say, marketing giants, right? Those companies are marketing first, and you enter into a space where data is endless and you have the ability to really analyze and you can go into analysis paralysis for days over kind of what makes consumers, choose different points. So if it's like when I was working at Hinkle, the color pink, right? Like anything pink sold, right? And we knew that if we wanted to drive things, adding pink to it really worked. And I think when you look at the food industry and you think about the data's there because we all own it. We know what consumers order. We know how they're ordering. So bringing that, rich set of data set to life and being able to understand and continue to optimize and making the consumer experience in store, online, more seamless and more comprehensive, and being able to reach more people on a daily basis is kind of what I'm most excited to bring over from the CPG space.
Amazing. A ton of similarities, of course, rooted in data to bring to the restaurant industry. And I'm wearing pink lipstick, so there you go. So let's go back to the beginning. Is there any defining moment or person that led you into the world of marketing? Tell us more about what mentorship means to you and how mentorship has shaped your own professional career journey.
So mentorship for me is definitely at the crux. If I remember, I was a young sophomore at Howard University where I had the opportunity to go to a career fair and meet Chuck Najum from Unilever very early in my career. I remember the moment I handed him my resume, he went through it and he's like, you spelled the word guest wrong. And I was just so taken aback. And I was on a mission, not only to fix it, but to correct it and to make sure that, kind of leading with excellence everywhere since then. And I ran back, fixed my resume, sent him an email, gave him a hard copy the next day when I saw him at the career fair. And that moment really was my entry point into CPG, entry point into marketing. And it's a space that I've loved, and I've continued to not only grow through having mentors along the way, like David Greenberg at L'Oreal, some phenomenal mentors along the way at Hinkle and Unilever as well, but always keeping a mentor and a sponsor, because you need mentors, but you also need sponsors as you go throughout your career, and being that person that also looks back and helps others. So I've always wanted to lift as I climb throughout the industry, not only for women, but also for other leaders, because at the end of the day, having people that not only look like you is very important in the workplace, but also being able to support individuals as they're coming up throughout their career.
I love all of that. I mean, everything you're just saying is amazing. And to see, you know, a spelling mistake on a resume to where you are now, it just proved that anything can really happen in your career. So as a woman of color, what are the challenges you've had to overcome to establish yourself as a leader you are today? And how have these experiences shaped your own leadership style?
Yes, I think when you look at the marketing industry, you see all different types of people. But when you look at the leaders far and far as you go up, you see less and less women of color in this space. And I think it's very important not only to be able to be you and bring your whole self to work every single day. I think it's the balance of having people understand who you are. I think one of the biggest challenges I faced throughout my career is this thought or theory of what executive presence is supposed to look like. What is it supposed to sound like? Who are you supposed to be in the rooms that you're in? And I think for me, my defining moment or my defining kind of element is keeping true to who I am. I'm a very bubbly person. I'm very bold in my decision making. I'm very direct in my conversations. And I think sticking true to who I am and not trying to transform to the spaces that I'm in has been my way to continue to shine in this industry.
So in keeping true to who you are, how do you foster a diverse working environment? And what do you think brands can do better to create more equitable talent opportunities across the board when it comes to hiring?
When you think about equitable talent opportunities, I really focus on finding ways to connect with the community you serve. If you know that X% of your consumer base is, Hispanic or Afro-Latino or Black, I think there's really key things that you should do to ensure your team reflects that as well. Because when you're looking at creative and you're looking to speak to these consumers, having a point of reference, but not using them as your sole point of view. I think having consumer groups and doing consumer research is super important, but hiring talent that fits those communities is also very, very, very important these days, because the nuances that you would never expect to know off the top or get back from a data set are just so rich and so important. And I think when you get those people on your team, supporting them, you may not have the same weekend experiences, you may not have the same family background, but being able to have just common points that lead back to greater business results are really important. And getting to understand them and understand where they come from and what drives their decision making really changes the relationship.
Exactly. And even beyond your own position as a mentor and a leader, what are the ways beyond the workplace you look to elevate and empower young women of color into the space?
I think outside of the workplace, I sit on the board of Horizons National Foundation, which is a foundation that helps summer learning gap that children typically have from not experiencing reading, learning opportunities during summer. So it's a summer camp that really has proven to elevate people who start out up to 3 grade levels during one summer. Through that program, I have been able to help really impact children in underrepresented communities not only begin to excel, but continue to excel after that. I think even during my time at L'Oreal, I created the first partnership between Howard and L'Oreal, where Brandstorm was integrated into every single classroom during the school year. So every single student had the opportunity in the School of Business to participate in a case study opportunity. That resulted in the hiring increase of over 246% at L'Oreal of multicultural talent, coming in strictly just from the pipeline that was created from the Howard University L'Oreal partnership through Brandstorm.
Wow, that's incredible. Even starting to think, before someone even starts their career, how can we give them the tools and help them excel? So important. When we look at marketing, I think marketers today are especially challenged to take actions with their efforts regarding their DE&I journeys. And as a leader coming into a new role, how do you envision your marketing strategies at Founders Table to reflect a more equitable and diverse future for its consumers?
I think when you think about from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint, there is a long road to go for corporate America in general. I think when we look at the boxes, right, there's this vision of equality, there's this vision of equity, and there's this vision of really liberation. And I hope to get to the point where liberation is found. And I don't know if you've ever seen the visual where you have the children standing on boxes, and then the last journey of that evolution has liberation, where there's no more fence. So there's no more boxes that need to be created. I think as we continue along that journey, it's about ensuring that when you walk into any of our spaces, that you see a diverse team, you see the ability for all people to be able to access our food. Because when we think about food deserts in America and across the country, being able to work to bring food opportunities across and education about healthy food options is something that Founders Table has been doing for the last 10 years. Chopped has a partnership with Wellness to the Schools, and that program has been bringing food health to the New York City area for the last 10 years. Our CEO sits on the board of Wellness to the Schools as well.
Wow, it seems like Founders Table is doing a lot of incredible work. So I would love to shift gears and ask if you could tell us even more about Founders Table and its brands and Dos Toros and Chopped at a high level overview.
Yeah, no, very high level, very new to the brand, but I would say Founders Table is a group of phenomenal entrepreneurs that have come together and to truly lead a revolution of bringing the best food and the best food quality across the East Coast today, and hopefully expanding beyond. It's comprised of both Chopped Creative Salad Company as well as Dos Toros, which was acquired in mid-2020.
That's so exciting because, well, Chopped celebrated its 20th birthday this year. So how is the organization celebrating?
Chopped has been around for over 20 years, thriving throughout the East Coast, opening up new restaurants. We just opened up one in my area this past week in Stamford, Connecticut, and really excited to turn 20, but I think it's even more exciting to turn 21. So look out for what's to come in 2022, where we will be celebrating 21 years of salad fun.
That is so exciting. I think that's all you can tell us for now, right?
That's all I can drizzle in for now, but definitely more exciting things to come. So continue to look out, follow us on Instagram. And as we kind of come of age and we kind of show you what it means to be 21 years in the making.
You'll have to come back onto the stage for the formal 21st celebration.
Yes, I think I might have to come back.
So talking about the past year, the past 18 months have been a challenging and uncertain time, of course. What are the ways in which you motivate your colleagues, your team members, your direct reports to just keep going?
I think it's all about balance. I think in the last 18 months, we've learned that we can all work from home. We've learned that we can all really thrive in different environments. And I think where it's necessary, how we connect is even more important, and even more important that it's meaningful when we're connecting together. And what I really, really enjoy about joining Founders Table is this point of connection. When we're in the office on Tuesdays, the team comes together, we all eat lunch together, we all have a moment, and it's really, really unique. And it's very powerful and different from any kind of group that I've been in prior, because it's really, one, we're tasting new foods. We're not always eating the same thing. So we're continuing to kind of explore our own food journey. And then it's also about building the community back up, because I think we've all been remote. We've all been kind of in our own silos. And so how you build community is super important, and how you motivate your team. I personally, I'm a servient leader. And so I want to make sure that not only is my team still growing and being stretched by opportunities in their remote or in-person workspaces, but giving them the opportunity to ask questions and be inquisitive and take on new things that they've never done before. Because when you're challenged and you start using a different part of your brain, it incites kind of just new opportunities that we could have probably never reached before.
Totally. I mean, those points of connection are very powerful, and it's just incredible to see you as a leader coming in and creating that incredible environment. And I know you touched on this a little bit, but what exactly about leadership excites you the most?
I think what excites me is being able to develop the talent of tomorrow, because at the end of the day, I want that person that's behind me to be able to take my job. They should be, if I ever decide to get up and walk away, they should never feel lost. They should never feel as if they cannot take on, the duties, because they've been guided and they've been nurtured to really grow. I think that is what, excites me about the opportunity of leadership and the ability to lead, and leading with purpose and passion behind everything I do.
Is that why L'Oreal, Henkel, and Unilever are all doing so well right now?
I mean, I wouldn't say
hands.
It's just my hand in it, but no, I think even when I look back at my time at Henkel, I remember writing on my resignation, this person will take my job because this person is ready. And she got the job and she did it. And she role, because at that point, it was really about, making sure that, one, she had a plan that was, when I was leaving, a couple months earlier, I brought her into meetings where I thought it was very purposeful for her to learn and be able to kind of respectfully lead those meetings in my absence. And I think a lot of leaders don't take the opportunity to give their team opportunities where they are put in the position to take your job one day, because they should be able to take your job one day. It's an uncomfortable feeling, but when you make it feel comfortable, the people that you're with are more empowered.
100%. And all I just have to say to this is that when Brand Innovators starts its Rising Talent program, we will definitely be tapping you.
Yes, thank you.
So as you're thinking about your own abilities, you're obviously always ever evolving, developing, but what skills are you looking to develop for your own marketing team this year?
I think the skills that I'm most interested in developing for my new team this year is all around kind of really rediscovering, really honing in on, those core marketing principles. Who is our consumer? What are they thinking? How can we anticipate their needs? How can we continue to grow our consumer base? So really the core fundamentals of marketing, and building and kind of drilling those in, and seeing kind of where we go from there.
So anticipating the needs of your consumers, I must ask, as we are all venturing back into restaurants, what is one way you envision your marketing strategies will shift to adapt to this new consumer of today?
So when we all went into pandemic mode, I will say, we all began ordering to go a lot more. And I really think Chopped was poised in the perfect position to react to that, because we had already been in the New York City market, which had a heavy delivery and to-go business. And seeing that evolve, expand, and grow across the board is amazing. But even more so, our markets that were outside of major cities grew too. And so being able to consistently welcome consumers back into our more urban markets is exciting. It's exciting to serve them even quicker. It's exciting to deliver even better service to them. And we can't wait to bring consumers back in. All of our stores are pretty much back open in the Manhattan area. So we're excited for those consumers to come back as they return to work.
Quicker, quicker, quicker. That is the New York way.
No, it is. And, we launched this new platform of group ordering. So now not only can you order for yourself, but you can now text a link to any of your colleagues. They can place their order themselves, and one person checks out all at one time. So it is such a unique way to welcome people back, because I think not only is it a way for your boss to maybe treat you to lunch, but it's also a great way if you're ordering with friends to get things done, and everything comes fully labeled and customized.
That is so incredible, because I'm just thinking back to the days where I would place orders for about 10 people, get about 5 things wrong, take about an hour doing it. So now it seems like everyone can just fill their own order out. I love that.
Yeah, and it can all be done through a quick, easy link. I mean, we do it here in the office quite often now since we launched the tool a little bit over a week ago, but we're excited to see how it grows.
All right, I'm going to quickly Slack that link to my entire team.
Yes.
So thinking about all of these amazing initiatives, is there any immediate opportunities you're looking to create impact on?
I think immediately, I just want to continue to foster this amazing relationship that Founders Table has already built. They have a phenomenal foundation, but I think for me, it's like, how do we continue to grow? I think growth is the word of the day, and it's growing through impactful connections with not only the people internally, but also with our consumers.
Totally. And I know, of course, you have a lot of competitors out there. So are there any ways you're looking to make the brand better stand out in the eye of the consumer?
Oh, yes. I am working to develop those. Can't share the secret sauce just yet. But I think when we look at the competitive landscapes, there's so many brands doing it well, both on a large and small scale, and looking at those brands and continuing to optimize and test and learn. So I think I'm most excited about the test and learn opportunities I'm going to have, because in contrary to big CPG, because these are restaurants, I can do 1-2 store tests in different cities and different markets and see what happens and see how each place reacts, and really be able to drive change quickly and efficiently. So I am excited for my first big launch to already be happening coming up in November. And so when that comes to life, I think there is an amazing way to see how innovation can be done in less than 30 days.
That's so exciting. I mean, I've already learned a ton of new innovations within Chopped and Dos Toros, so I'm excited to see what else is out there. I mean, what you just told us is incredible. So I know we touched on about this a little bit earlier, but as we're thinking about the challenging era of COVID, what are the ways Founders Table is stepping in to create a better world? Can you tell us even more about that partnership with Wellness to the Schools?
Yeah, so our founder, Nick Marsh, sits on the board of Wellness to the Schools, and it's truly a program that's bringing education through food and also food availability throughout the New York City area. And so I am really excited to bring that mission and many more of other Chops works to life in the coming year. Not only has Chopped partnered with Wellness to the School, Chopped does a Gives Day for every single new store opening. Just last week, we partnered with the Boys and Girls Club of Stanford and donated 100% of our proceeds to the Boys and Girls Club of Stanford. So every single market has a unique connection with the city that it's located in. And I think that's just so unique and so such a point of differentiation. And it's really around bringing food options to youth. And that's kind of the space that they've carved out for themselves, and really making sure that youth know about healthy eating choices.
That really is so unique and provides so much room for, social good and innovation at the same time. So I'm really excited again to see what comes to life in the next year. And thinking about the future, what is one prediction you have over the next 12 months for the future of restaurants like Chopped and Dos Toros, just in general?
When I think about the future of restaurants, I think that they are coming back stronger than ever. And people are excited to get out. People are excited to try new things. And as we all get back into our new normal world, I think that even more unique, bold concepts will flourish and emerge and come to life.
Love that. And now I have some just additional questions for you. Tell us about a proud moment in your career and why it was so important to you.
I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think my proudest moment in my career was really forging the relationship between Howard University and L'Oreal. Why, for me, as an alum of Howard University, what makes Howard unique is the partnerships that it does have in the classroom. And to be able to bring one myself felt as kind of like that check mark, like I had established something, and leaning into great leaders, both within L'Oreal, like Erica Culpepper, who supported my vision, as well as our HR team, Kathy Chivas at the time, who truly supported me in my efforts, and being able to execute it with excellence is what made it truly a proud moment for me. I think from a marketing standpoint, my restage of Dark and Lovely was probably my second proudest moment. Just being able and being trusted with the ability to knock down a logo that had been around for decades, to bring what I call our hero SKU, the Beyonce box of Honey Blonde, Honey Bae Blonde, to the forefront, taking her from being the 90s, early 2000s Beyonce into 21st century Beyonce, giving her a whole new look, restaging the packaging, bringing to life this brand and growing the brand inside and outside of COVID. So pre-COVID, we began to grow. Through COVID, with women coloring at home, we grew like gangbusters. And then in a semi-post COVID world, as the world began to open up, just seeing the brand continue to grow is extremely exciting. Soft Sheen Carson as a brand has and will ever have a very soft spot in my heart.
So speaking of continued growth, and I know this is just a question that's been on my mind, what can heritage brands learn when it comes to newer digital first world? And when it comes to engaging that younger consumer, what can heritage brands learn today?
From working on a heritage brand of Soft Sheen Carson, I will say, and leading that portfolio of over 11 brands, I think it's funny what TikTok can do. I would say that embrace the digital movement, be ready for it. Magic Shave Cream was one of the many brands in my Soft Sheen Carson portfolio. And when I tell you, when TikTok made people buy it, over 56 million views.
Yes.
Out of stock for roughly 6 months almost in 2020. And an anniversary itself in 2021. And we were ready, right? We were ready. And it had a light that was just so effortlessly done by a group of consumers who found something they liked and talked about it. And the word spread like wildfire. So how do you uniquely engage TikTok to be a driving force for you, in an unforced way. And I think heritage brands have to strike the right balance for that.
Hashtag TikTok made me buy it is really real, people. I like to say that TikTok is the epicenter of culture. It truly, truly is. I mean, everyone and anyone is on it. And if you're not paying attention, you will miss moments like that. So I have a question for you. If you could give your younger self just one piece of advice, looking back on your incredible career, what would that be?
I would say to my younger self, this is the one thing, and I know corporations will cringe, is that I thought my first company would be my last company. I thought that would be where I stay forever. And I tell my younger self, learn as much as you can, embrace every opportunity, and don't be afraid to step off the ladder. And I think that is what I've done throughout my career, is take really different steps and make really different moves and continue to be who you are. And I think that in my early career, I wanted to fit into the mold of what corporate America told me I should be. And I think had I truly stuck to my guns and embraced it a little bit earlier, who knows where I could be. But I'm thankful for where I am now.
Exactly. So thinking about not even the brands that you've worked with, are there any brands that you look up to?
I say I look up to so many brands, but the brand that is always truest to my heart and the brand that I think continues to do it well is Ben & Jerry's. I had the dynamic team ability to work with Jay Curley, Michael Hayes, and many of the individuals that are still leading that brand today. And I think the purpose that they put behind the brand, they just happen to sell ice cream, right? Mm-hmm. And so it is the ability to create something that is so much bigger than who you are as a place that sells goods, is why I admire and continue to admire Ben & Jerry's so much.
Such a big brand that is just not afraid to speak up and create impact. So definitely agree on that front. I know we're coming up on 1 more minute. So I have one last question for you. What is your favorite food item on each of the menus?
So my favorite food item at Chopped, and I will be very specific, is the Tex-Mex ranch dressing. If I tell you, it's the best thing ever. It's what is unique about Chopped. Like, their dressings are handmade. I had the distinct opportunity of going into one of our commissaries.
That was great. Thank you, Melissa and Ariel, for joining us. Loved that. So many great pieces of advice in there about talking to your younger self and how to shape your career and not to just think that you're going to be at the same company the whole way, but just stay true to your values and your beliefs and move forward. So for our next conversation, we would love to invite Julie Yuffie, who's the GM of Growth Markets for Europe at AB InBev, and Chris Pizarro, who's the SVP of Global Sales and Marketing at Canoe Ventures, to the stage to talk more. Hi, Julie. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Hello. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just turn it over to you guys so you can get started.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Chris Bazar, SVP of Global Sales and Marketing at Canoe. We are an ad technology company based out of Denver, Colorado. I am honored to participate today in the Women's in Marketing Summit, and really to be able to chat with Julie Yuffie, GM Growth Markets for Europe at AB InBev. Julie, shall we jump right in?
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you, Chris, for the great introduction.
Yeah. So Julie, help me out here. Growth markets, kind of a broad term, maybe. What does that mean to you?
So for AB InBev, growth markets in Europe are more than 30 countries across Europe, very varied geography, from as far north as the Nordic countries, Sweden, Finland, etc., all the way to Switzerland, Austria, Poland, Greece, Portugal. So we, as far east as you can go, as far west as you can go. But what really defines these is they are fast growth markets, both a top line and bottom line perspective. So they're growth engines. And we go to market in these countries, through mostly directly, but some also through some very strong strategic partners and relationships. And we have to approach them. Often we're a challenger in the marketplace, and we have to approach them with an innovative mindset to be able to really make a big impact, right? When we're not the leader in the market. So it's a really
kind of a strange position,
really
right? Yeah. I would think sometimes a strange position for your company to be in, to be the challenger.
It is, but what's great is that we get to really test our creativity, our entrepreneurship, and most importantly, use this innovative thinking to really navigate, I would say, uncharted waters or complicated challenges. And to me, as a marketer, I think this is probably the #1 skill that future marketers need to have, because the world just keeps getting more complex and the challenges get bigger and bigger as you go in your career. So being able to kind of flex the muscle to be creative and stretch your thinking and innovate, I think is really the key to successful impact in the future.
Makes sense. So Julie, that's fantastic thinking. I'm sure you just didn't evolve to that this morning when you woke up, right? So we'll come back to everything, but I wanted, since this is brand innovators in this community, I know everyone just likes to find out, how'd you get here? So can you talk about your career path a little bit? Where did you start? How did you kind of get to this idea of flexibility and optimism you obviously have? Just take us through that a little bit.
Sure. So I'm a brand and consumer junkie. I love to understand how consumers' minds work. I love to offer them, new experiences and new products. And to be honest, I feel very privileged in my career that I've been a part of these tremendous cherished moments in consumers' lives, whether it was developing the beauty innovations that women would use on the red carpet for moments like the Emmys or the Grammys when I was at Unilever, to being able to create better choices for moms. When I worked on Lipton tea, we created, our first range of Rainforest Alliance certified teas, and Better For You RTD teas. And in coming to ABI, I've had the immense privilege of leading, moments that consumers will remember forever, like the 2018 World Cup and, seeing their team win on the pitch in Russia. So for me, the opportunity to really understand the consumer and continue to innovate for them new experiences, new products is really where, I get excited. And this has been what I've kind of brought to every single I've had, whether it's been leading global innovations at ABI in my role as the VP of core brands globally, and as previously CMO of Europe and the Middle East, and now in the growth markets that we have, is how do we continue to bring new, better, more exciting innovations and experiences that thrill and delight our consumers every day.
Love it. So obviously, where we are, everyone's been impacted by COVID in one way, shape, or form. What have you had to do from the beverage industry wise? What disruption happened? Was it supply chain? Was it brands? Was it, to talk a little bit about those challenges?
The world turned upside down. What I will say is obviously every industry was impacted. And I'm based in Brussels right now. And unfortunately, Europe is going through another wave where there are rising cases of COVID. And when you conduct business part of our business is conducted in bars and hotels and restaurants and what we call the on-trade. So it's clearly this impacts us in a very, very big way, especially when there are restrictions from the government, when things are shut down, et cetera. However, that being said, the consumer trend that was present before COVID was, maintained and in fact accelerated. And some of these themes that we saw happening, whether it was the rise in e-commerce, premiumization and trading up to more premium global brands, at-home consumption, an interest in health and wellness. These trends were there, and they really enabled us to be quite resilient during this time. I have to say the big lesson for me of COVID was, again, this innovation mindset to help us navigate the uncharted territory, right? We knew we needed to continue to offer consumers what they needed. We knew we needed to be able to take care of our consumers in our communities. And once again, we were able to create innovations in route to market, in product, in experiences that helped us weather the storm and satisfy consumer needs in unmet ways. So some examples from the innovation side, right? We use the technology that we had been working on with de-alcoholization, right? To create non-alcoholic products to make hand sanitizer and provide, thousands and thousands of liters of hand sanitizer and disinfecting cleaner to hospitals and individuals across Europe. Likewise, we had built a platform that enabled consumers to donate to closed pubs and restaurants during the pandemic and be able to redeem for beer when the pubs reopened. So you could provide immediate cash into this industry that was really, really battered by the restrictions. These experiences, what was interesting is not just that we're able to offer them and develop them and react quickly, but that we were able to learn quickly and then deploy them across multiple global markets. In this case, a platform that was built in Europe for Save Pub Life, as we called it in the UK, was scaled to 21 global markets. And we deployed millions of dollars into the hospitality industry that otherwise was, shuttered because of government restriction. And so this really benefited communities. It really enabled us to engage consumers. The products we created, whether it was the hand sanitizer I mentioned, or innovations, like we used beer to make bread and donate to shelters across Europe, right? These were all born out of innovative thinking that we had been using to tackle other challenges. And with a slight redeploy, we're able to really accelerate the business and our relationship with consumers at this time. And then some of these, frankly, created some momentum that has stuck. So, for example, consumers were unable to, watch live sports because they weren't there in person. We were able to work with technology to actually put them in the heart of the action, as though they were in the seats interacting with other people watching the game live. That was a tremendous experience. Likewise, we have a team who works on events. And in Belgium now, you could order an entire event basically to come to your home, and we could set this event up for you when events weren't happening live, as usual. So the acceleration, I think, has precipitated by COVID has impacted our business for consumers in a very positive way. But the thing taught me is look for the opportunity in the uncharted waters. And the most impactful thing you can do is probably using this innovative mindset to try and make an impact.
I just love that the infrastructure and the skill set that you set up just to be in growth markets and be the challenger is the same mindset, and that takes it to be able to be flexible and work in such crazy circumstances like COVID. It's fantastic.
Indeed. I mean, I never would have thought it at the time because it was so chaotic, but know, it's one of those experiences that's going to stick with me forever.
Well, and if the team thinks that way, then your muscle memory is just to react that way, right?
That's
and
exactly.
and then you're there. Amazing examples of making lemonade from lemon in a few of those situations. What caught my ear is that when you said, and you kind of breezed over, but you're like, oh, we went from, you know, took it in one market and then scaled it to 22. You know, that doesn't just happen. So what were some of the nuances of, you know, was London or Belgium different than what you had to do in New York or Mexico City or something? Like that just doesn't happen. There must be nuances in logistics there.
So I've been fortunate. I didn't go into detail on this about my career, but you know, I've had a lot of roles where I've been on the global team, or I've been on the local team or the regional team, and across categories. I mean, I've marketed to teenage boys, menopausal women, you know, in developed markets, in developing markets,
Different
cosmetics,
products, right?
beer,
Those were different
products,
Okay.
different
All right.
countries, different languages, different targets. But the thing that's most interesting, so I've been on both sides, right? I've been the agency, you know, client, and then built an internal agency team for our, you know, all intents and purposes. I've been on the receiving end of the global work. I've been also on the team who was trying to make a one size fits all for the world. So what I've picked up from these experiences is that ultimately, I believe consumers have more in common than have differences. And especially as you go through your career, being able to understand the things that unite and the experiences that are common, as well as those distinctions, actually can help you sharpen yourself, be a better marketer, and also drive innovation and growth on whatever you're working on. So you can make these connections across markets. For example, the process we used when we were trying to scale solutions during the initial days of COVID was not dissimilar to a process that I used in 2018 on the World Cup, because I was leading core brands who were all trying to activate World Cup in different countries, different teams, different brand identities, et cetera, right? And there were some universal things that worked everywhere that we could learn via, you know, connecting the right dots and bringing the right pieces together. In the case of the platform that I was mentioning earlier, we built a platform, and because, you know, we had a team in place internally who was building this skill set already, we were able to then quickly see, okay, it's working here. What tweaks and small things could we make, you know, to see how it could be applicable everywhere? That's a different approach than saying, okay, I need to build this for Sweden. And what is the ideal solution for Norway, right? This was a rapid test and learn and innovate process, but I think it allowed us to have tremendous impact and also find the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will.
Got it. Something you said there, I found very interesting. I think a lot of times when people think about innovation and, you know, a word like that, it always has to be completely new, never thought about it before. And you gave a couple examples of, well, you know, we dusted that plan off that was successful in 2018. So but I think that's key, because innovation does not necessarily have to be new every time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to, it's always radical, like I've invented a better wheel, right? Or a better mousetrap. That being said, right, yes, we learned a lot, right? And we learned a lot from the good and the bad. So like with this approach where we were sharing ideas across markets during COVID and during World Cup time, we also shared as we were building new businesses within Europe. So for example, we learned from the experiences of diverse markets like the US, Mexico, Brazil, when building our internal Draftline agency team, both from the good and from the bad. Sure, we were the first one that was a multilingual studio because Europe has so many languages and such a diverse portfolio of countries, et cetera. But you know, there was a lot we could take from countries that were operating in one language or that had been doing some things particularly well, had built some skills that were particularly strong. Similarly, when it comes to activating our brands, one of the things I'm proudest of is taking this mindset of, we know we've learned some things that have worked in the past, and kind of reapplying to a new problem for activating Budweiser and the England 2019 senior women's football team. So that's, women's soccer. We had long been a sponsor of men's soccer and Premier League in the UK. And here we had this opportunity to support the women's sport, which was not typically done by beer brands, as well as bring one of our brands that had not typically done this before to try and drive some impact. And we were able to create a tremendous program. Some of the ideas were wholly new, right? We kind of created content based off of inspiring words from Queen Elizabeth I that the consumer knew and used them to rally the nation in support of the women's team. And then some of them were principles that had just never been applied before. We were the first to put the women's athletes on the packaging. We were the first to support the team in a way that would be more common in men's sport, but isn't often the case in women's sport. And so we brought a lot of attention, we brought a lot of energy behind the team, obviously behind the brand, opening up the aperture of the brand to new consumers. But the most important part was we were able to bring the community together in a way that hadn't before and change the impact on the sport. And so again, this was a combination of the wholly new and then the smart connecting of the dots, if you will.
Right. No, it's an important combination. You mentioned the word "we" so many times when you're talking about your team, and we activated this and we activated that. How do you evaluate your staff in the first place, and then how do you work to have them be able to further their careers and involve? So what things do you look in the first place, and then how are you continually looking to evolve the folks who execute on your behalf?
This is such a good question. So I think the first thing to say is I'm a big believer in all of the research that we've seen, that the more diverse the team, the better able you are to tackle the complicated challenges, the uncharted territories, right? Everything we've just been saying. I think the combination of the unique ways of thinking and the complementary ways of thinking really makes a difference, particularly when you're in a crisis or a challenge, or you're not just performing what you know you already do well, but you're trying to go somewhere you've never been before, which is, fortunately or unfortunately, the new norm, right? That said, for me, what I like to look for is people who complement one another from the skill set perspective, from a point of view. I work with a very diverse team. They're sitting in countries all over Europe. They have completely different backgrounds and skill sets. Some grew up in finance, some grew up in consumer insight, some grew up in sales, some grew up, I have people on the team who were in the military, who worked on nonprofits, everything in between. Supply chain people, experts in logistics. It's a very, very broad group of people. And I like to bring the different vantage points. And I also like to complement what I don't know, because the reality is there's more that I don't know than I know. So that's what I look for in the team, particularly as the challenges mount. And I think as long as you have, you might have different points of view, but you have 100% commitment to tackle the problem, that's going to be a winning team.
Wholeheartedly agree. It seems like I would love to work for you in terms of as it just seems like you're a natural mentor leader just by your approach. So is there again, kind of going back in your career, just really just came to me is there any mentors that you had, or people that you looked up to, or even relationships that you've now had in the industry for 30 years. I'm at a conference here in LA right now myself, and people, you're like, I don't even remember where I met you in the first place, but you're an amazing person and I learned so much from you. So anything just around the other relationships in the industry over the years? Absolutely.
There are people I admire, I've worked with, who I've admired for a very, very long time. And I tremendously respect their trajectory. but more importantly, the way they led. And I look to that. The lesson I took away from these mentors is be the person that you want to be. Act the way that you know you can go home at the end of the day and know, okay, I acted with integrity, was a good person. I think that for me is very, very important. And that's the leaders that I hold in highest regard are the ones who do that time after time after time, while also delivering tremendous performance, right? It's they didn't change themselves to be able to deliver. In fact, they delivered because of themselves. I think that's a very important lesson learned. But the other thing that I think is really, really key, and it goes back to this point about diverse teams, is there's so much I learn from my team every single day because they have information, experiences, perspective that I don't have. And that I think it's incredibly important to make sure that you're learning and growing, like that one is learning and growing every day, not just from above, but from all directions. And those are the people who hold me accountable for, again, being the good person, for making sure that I'm really, pushing my very best and holding my weight in the team, and for making sure that we maximize the creative opportunity that we have when our brains all come together. So we've taken a little bit of a sidetrack, but
no, it's all good. We got time. It's all good. When you were saying that too, it did make me think of answering my own question. I was like, there's some leaders that I looked at and I said, I don't want to be like them. Like sometimes just being exposed to the ones that you look up to and you're like, I want to be just like them. There's been some others where I'm like, yeah, actually that guy, that's not what I want to do. So I actually like this on the previous panel. I thought this was a good question. I'm going to throw it out to you. I won't ask you what your favorite brands are within your own company. I don't want to cause any issues or anything. But other brands that you look out in an execution, you're like, oh man, I wish I did that one. That was fantastic. Or just brands that you admire.
Oh, I mean, as I said from the beginning, I'm a brand junkie. So I probably have, a brand.
All right, then what are your top two or three? You don't have to go on all day.
I mean, there's so many. I'm just trying to think of which one.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
I think no. What I would say is I've been super impressed. I would say recently by, well, of course, oh my goodness, I feel like I should be stumped on this question. There's so many good answers. I love the work that Burger King has done in recent years. I think they've been remarkably consistent despite being able to constantly innovate. Right? No matter what the activity is, I just think it's, every single time, right? It is 3 key messages, it's only those messages, but the way it's delivered is there's tremendous breadth in the way they deliver those messages. Some of my all-time favorite work, if it's even can be called a brand, I think was California Milk Board, right? So if you remember back in the day, all those Got Milk, campaigns, I mean, talk about, branding an unbranded or a commodity, right? If you can call it that. I think that it made something that was never top of mind, and that lasted for, I don't even know how long. Back into my indulgence world, I absolutely love the way that I think it was over the last year actually that McDonald's kind of reinforced its classic status, this whole notion of like everyone has their order, and has continued to reinvent and come up with new ways to approach that. I have lots of favorites, but those are some of my favorites.
All right, I think we're going to do another. I think we might have hit on something here. I think we could have a whole show on this.
Probably.
Julie's favorite brands. So what's the future for the beverage industry? I mean, some things like I don't know, you guys may have known, but who knew, this was going to be the next big thing, or, where waters and then flavored waters and all that. Where do you see the industry moving? Is it because of COVID? You mentioned there's stickiness around health. Where in general, where do you think the next trends or pivots are going?
I think there's still a lot of traction in the three that I mentioned earlier. So again, premiumization, the strong growth of global brands, because again, this is an industry that, for the most part is very, very local, and there's nothing wrong with local, but we still see, always the tension between the local and the global trends. And I think health and wellness, making positive choices. We've seen the rise of products that really tap into that, both functionally and emotionally for consumers. And especially, as COVID has given people time to pause and reflect on their choices, we're seeing that in a big way. And again, I think there's a huge, we know there's a tremendous runway of growth in e-commerce and direct-to-consumer businesses. And this is really accelerating the way in which we interact and sell to consumers. If you think about the entire environment about watching sport, and watching sports, consuming beer, it's a natural activity. It happens. It's a prime consumption moment, and that whole system, right, has been changing and morphing, not in a bad way, but to more readily serve the consumer, faster, with more precision, with more choice, simply because of what's happened in the last few years. And I think that's great, because I think the consumer wins. And when we're looking to find ways to win with the consumer, that's where the innovation lies, that's where the creativity is, and that's where people win. And again, I go back to my previous point, right? The world is becoming more and more complex. The shopping behavior is more and more complex. The choices are multiplying. That's good for consumers. That's really, really good for consumers. So as marketers try to navigate this space, we need to make sure that we are building teams who are best able to tackle these creative challenges. And the reason I call them creative challenges is because there isn't a script. Just like with COVID, there's no script on how to win. So to me, being able to make connections across markets, to make connections across industries, to be able to weave in insights that can be deployed at a store level, irrespective of where the insight came from, right, is very important. And that, I think, being able to flex that muscle now and throughout your career give marketers an edge, but they need to be able to take those opportunities.
Nope, makes complete sense. All right, we're starting to come to the end of our time. I want to go back to a younger Julie, just starting off in the industry. The classic question: what advice would you give your younger self advice? One or 2 points of anything maybe you would have done differently or done quicker. No.
I would say, and I kind of like a broken record, but it really looms large with me. They take every opportunity to embrace complicated challenges, especially when you don't know how you're going to tackle them, because it will force you to train yourself to innovate. It will force you out of your comfort zone. And this is and when you come through managing or navigating of the complicated problem, this is going to be the skill that you rely on time after time to improve your creativity, to improve your impact, and to lead marketers of the future.
I think that's wonderful advice.
What advice would you give?
Be flexible. I think when you're an optimist, when you're taking chances, certainly in my 20s, this is exactly the way it should be done, and which is wonderful in one aspect, right? That you're a leader and you can do these things. But you need to listen to other folks. Need to be flexible. I love what you said about your team and having diverse opinions, diverse people. I think of Abraham Lincoln and the team of rivals, and he hired his whole staff of of different people who were against him, and he said I had a stronger team because of it. So yeah, definitely resonate. All right, Julie, any last minute thoughts? I know we're coming up on time, but we could certainly just keep scatting here, but if you're good.
No, I mean, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the questions. I definitely think, we could talk all day about innovations. And again, I have more in my list of brands, but I would say embrace the challenge and, use your innovative mindset to embrace that and stand yourself in good stead for the future.
Fantastic. Julie, it's really been a pleasure talking with you. Hope everyone has a great rest of session. Again, thrilled to be here in Women in Marketing, and we'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much. Thank you both, Chris and Julie, for being here. Julie, I love that advice that you gave about just embracing challenges, even if it's something new and it's out of your comfort zone, to help train you for flexibility and creativity. I feel as though we've all sort of been forced to do that in this last year, and there has been this last year and a half, and there's been a lot of growth opportunity just by embracing challenges and trying new things and seeing what will work.
Thank you. I mean, I do think it's since we're talking about women in marketing, I do think it's important to make the distinction. This isn't about, there's a lot of literature, of course, there, right, about imposter syndrome and all that. This is not that. I'm not trying to say like, just believe in yourself. I'm saying the good and the bad, right? Because I learned a lot from the bad experiences too. But that challenge really, and being able to figure out muscle memory on how to navigate through the dark, if you will, I think is a really, really big skill that makes the distinction between the talents who will go on to achieve and the rest of us. I hope I'm learning it well enough to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think so. I mean, we've seen some great work you guys have been doing, and I'm sure you have more to come for us next year. Really looking forward to that. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. I know we have our next speakers who are we're waiting in the waiting room, and I just want to say it was a great session and we really enjoyed having you.
Thank
you both.
Yep.
Bye, Julie. Bye, Chris. So we're getting ready for our last session of the day. So many learnings from our speakers. Julie made some great points, and we heard from Jeanette earlier about innovation and struggling. And so, and just, seeking strength in female leadership and building the career. And I am so excited to welcome for our last session, Liz Caselli-McCall, who's the head of content and digital at Nestle, and Samantha Thompson Hutchinson, who's the senior director of client development at Ben Group. Please join me in welcoming Liz and Samantha.
Hi.
Hi, guys. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
introduction.
Excellent. Well, I won't stand in your way. I'll let you two take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in, and welcome to this fireside session about women in marketing. Just to introduce myself, I work for Ben as Senior Client Director EMEA. In brief, Ben is an entertainment artificial intelligence company that integrates brands into influencer streaming, TV, music, and film content. I'm thrilled to be joined by Liz Caselli-McCall, who's Head of Content and Digital at Nestle Master Brands globally. Liz and her team work to produce compelling digital content and ensure industry-leading social media communications driven by audience insights on purpose-based stories around climate, sustainability, innovation, and inclusion. Prior to Liz's global role, she led Nestle digital content in the US and received recognition for the Best Content Marketing Program of 2020 by the Rally Awards. She also worked with nonprofit organizations and is a proud board chairman for Miriam's Kitchen, working to end chronic homelessness in Washington, DC. Liz, welcome. It's a great opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you very much for joining the conversation around women in marketing. You're joining us from Switzerland today, and you recently moved from the US during the pandemic. This can't have been easy. How was your move?
Yep, easy is not the word I would use, but I will say I had great support all the way along, and so it was probably as easy as it could have been. I think that it's it's been an adventure. I think one of the things that has surprised me is a lot of the things I was nervous about actually went very smoothly, whereas some things I took for granted have really challenged me. So a lot of my focus has been on working in a more cross-cultural environment, being on teams that are truly global in nature, and figuring out what that means for communication styles and leadership styles, and the right incentives, and how you kind of create a comfortable and psychologically safe environment for the team. So it's been a lot to digest in a short amount of time, but definitely a fast rate of learning, which is exciting in itself.
Great. I love Switzerland. I'm very jealous. I'm going
and there have
to
been a lot of beautiful hikes with the dog as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to go straight into the leadership questions, actually. And as a leader yourself, you're always developing your abilities. So we wanted to ask you, what are you looking to improve on in the back half of 2021?
Yeah, I think especially not having an inherent cultural similarity with everyone on my team. I think what I would like to continue to get much stronger at is really customizing my approach for an individual or for a setting. Whereas there are some things that we had as a team motivation and things like that in the US that were very grounded on cultural similarity. I think a huge focus for me now is, how do I find the right path for the right person, both with the culture they're coming from and also just their culture as an individual, and how they fall on some of those cultural indices. I'm a big nerd about the self-assessment kind of material, but being able to really change approach and read those feedback signals to continue to customize your approach to make it effective for the person and not just for you from your own perspective.
That sounds great. And I know that obviously diversity, sustainability, innovation are kind of big passion points for you. What skills would you like your marketing team to develop based on those kind of changes that you want to make?
That's a great one. I have a long wish list for all of us. We have a very kind of continuous improvement mindset, and we're a team that likes to be very hands-on and do sort of direct development, even if that's not how we're doing our main campaign, so that we're getting cross experience. But I think the biggest thing would really be just being incredibly audience attuned, really being audience centric, having that be the focus in all spaces, in all conversations, and calibrating more and more to take the audience feedback loops and really apply those insights to every next project to get smarter and smarter about our audience.
And that must be hard because you work across all brands. So that's a lot of insights and data that you have to analyze, right? To do that.
It's a lot of audience segments. I would say one of the things that we're having to continuously reinforce is that learning something once doesn't mean it's a learning that applies everywhere. So if we learn something about socially conscious millennials in the UK, you really can't assume that's going to be the exact same application when we're looking at that. I mean, parents in West Africa, like it's a really wide range of the segments that come up. So it's a lot of having to build, but also compartmentalize.
Yeah, we spoke before, didn't we, about some of the sort of changes that have come through the pandemic as well, and millennials and Gen Z being very focused on transparency and sort of relating and aligning with companies that share their same kind of brand values. So it'd be really interesting to know sort of what changed through the pandemic, especially across the business you look after, and how you're kind of adapting to that with the industry and internally actually as well.
Yeah, I think transparency, authenticity are big watchwords. It wasn't totally new territory in the face of the pandemic, but it was something that became much more primary. And I would say a lot of content, even that we produced directly, got really scrubbed down for logistical reasons when we first went away from studio production, went away from full crews. And that was a really interesting transition to say, if we can all agree that production value doesn't matter, what does? And how does that authenticity kind of intersect with some of your content choices and making content choices that are really going to be the best for the audience and going to be the best for kind of the space that you're meeting them in?
That's great. And you were talking as well about sort of how you implement that with teams, because you've worked for some smaller non-profit organizations, as well as obviously now a huge company like Nestle, and just how you kind of work with those teams internally to sort of adapt and make change. And how do you kind of start that within your team and then kind of cascade that across the business?
Yeah, I think there is and probably always will be a lot of kind of education, and digital can play a really important role in setting that audience first mindset and stimulating that conversation. So certainly in the past 6 months, one thing I've been doing a lot of is internal roadshows and really coming into spaces and talking about who is your audience, understand that, what does that mean for your digital strategy, what's in your digital toolbox, kind of how can you think about pulling different levers in different situations with your audience and calibrating appropriately for what they need and where they are. And I love it. There are certain things, I know that there are certain insights that if I put up on the screen, it's going to derail us in a good way. And everyone's going to be like, whoa, like this, in that case, should we look at this? Have we tested it this way? Like, and so I'm a huge fan of that kind of environment, really being education first, also being receptive to that. I mean, I'm a big believer that like digital is one of the teams that needs to carry that flag throughout the organization and be bringing outside in. But also that's something we really welcome from our climate specialists and from lots of subject matter experts that go outside what we can possibly bring, and being just as open to hearing from them and understanding what they see on the landscape, and really being symbiotic in that way.
Have you sort of come against any challenges that have made that more difficult, and sort of how have you overcome them? Or would you say it's an ongoing challenge because you're trying to change perception?
It is. I think sometimes if I'm in a complaining mood, I will say I can't, in 2021, almost 2022, we really shouldn't be talking about if digital has a seat at the table. That's like a very 2009 conversation for me. We should be way, way past that strategically in the role that digital plays. But the reality is it depends a lot on the part of the conversation, the part of the organization, and what they're focused on and the ways that they execute, and if that's changed and hasn't changed. So I would say there are definitely challenges in making sure that some of that digital literacy stuff is front of mind, that the right people are in the room from the beginning of projects rather than kind of coming at the end and seeing digital as a last layer to put on a marketing or communications effort. And so that absolutely can be challenging. It's happening not just with my team, but with lots of teams in the organization are doing a great job carrying the trumpet there. So it's something that I think we're making great progress on, but it's work that's never done. And even when we've kind of gotten that to that 2021 mindset we want on designing for digital first and being data informed, the environment will continue to evolve. Our peers will continue to push boundaries, and we'll be doing the roadshow all over again. So I'm sure it will be never ending.
That's great. So with that in mind, sort of what channels will really matter or sort of be important to Nestle's growth over the next few years? I know you lost work with social. We spoke a bit about ambassadors as well, or aligning with some influencers. But sort of which channels are sort of most important to you moving that business forward?
Yeah, I think day to day, we take a very channel centric strategy. When we look out years, we try to kind of break out of the channel construct and think about where our audience is going. I think ambassadors is something that we see being really channel agnostic. We think about ambassadors kind of like at their cocktail party as much as in their feed, and how we're sort of cultivating and equipping our ambassadors to engage really sincerely with the brand and bring a lot of passion, and how do we create experiences for them where that enthusiasm will carry through, no matter what channel they're executing on, so that when a new platform kind of catches fire, it's less about it will be about learning the intricacies of that platform and how you really perform well there, but that we're building on a foundation that's much more about kind of our core identity that should be able to translate anywhere, and being able to have ambassadors that can be in all spaces because they're coming with that sincere passion and experience. And when you're in food and beverage, that's luckily like creating amazing experiences comes like very naturally to the product and the brands. So I think that that's something that we've tried to kind of change mindset when we look out farther to not necessarily have a sense of what will be the next hot thing and trying to place bets there, but rather having a really strong sense of what we have to say and who our audience is, and then the platforms and channels will come.
That's great. And with your transition from the US market to now the global markets, what sort of how has that been for you, for anyone that's looking to make that move themselves in the industry? What have you got any tips on how to make that transition?
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting. It's very enriching. I think that pace of learning is super fast, and you feel you're using muscles you haven't used in a long time. There are some ways that it almost has me like flashing back to when I was first starting my career, and I would be texting my friends and saying like, what do you do if there's this kind of vibe, or how do you ask this kind of question? It honestly feels like in many ways like being a freshman again to go into such a new culture, but in a way that has you has you firing on all cylinders. So it takes a lot of flexibility and open-mindedness, but I would say most of all, patience with yourself, because certainly my first 6 months in a new country, still working in my native language in this case, but operating day to day, not in my native language, you're not bringing your absolute best to your work. It's just not a realistic expectation of yourself. And so it helps to kind of take a step back, have advocates. So my boss at Nestle very much sets that long game expectation that you're not going to solve it all overnight. Know what your long game is, and knowing you can give yourself some time, that you're not going to need to be perfect day one, and that's not a realistic expectation of yourself, because if you don't start to relax that, you'll really make yourself crazy, which I did for several months.
That's really great advice. And I think when we talk about diversity, a lot of that can be just down to sort of culture as well. So we assume that just because, even if we sort of speak the same language, that things are very similar, but we know they're not. We've all worked at different companies and in very different ways. And I think, if we look at it, actually, what's quite interesting for I think some of the people watching is to perhaps think about how they can make those changes, but also to maybe some of the younger people who have tuned in, just learning about how they can really grow in an organization, and maybe bring some of their own kind of diverse cultural views to the forefront in discussions, and how easy it is to be able to do that. And I wondered if you'd experienced any of that at Nestle.
Yeah, I think that's a factor all the time. And in the US, I got to be part of a really interesting transition, which was a full headquarters move for Nestle, which meant that we were bringing in a lot more talent in a new city. And it was a real kind of influx of energy and different perspectives. I would say my best advice at kind of like bringing that as you grow in an organization is really look for places to add value and start from that mindset of adding value. Even there are times to set boundaries, but like as a fundamental, like even outside your scope, come into those conversations with your core orientation being, are there little ways I can bring my perspective, my expertise, and bring value to this other initiative? I often find that the work that I look back and I'm like, man, that was so strategically important and critical for our objectives, that is valued by some people, but a lot of what like I'm really remembered for and created some of my strongest relationships and sponsorships within the organization was stuff that at the time I was like, well, this isn't really our main priority, but I think we can like really deliver some value here. Let's make sure we're in. And it's really important to someone and to someone who continues to be a relationship and in many cases, mentors for me. So having that orientation towards openness and that seeking to create value, never compromising on what you know is the most strategically important, but allowing some of those extracurriculars to come in, because it can be an unusual path towards some of your more important relationships.
That's fantastic advice, and something we probably will need to be very aware of still as we try and adapt and evolve in our businesses. I'd like to dive into your experience as a female leader in marketing today. I wondered if there've been any significant barriers in your career today to any of the organizations that you've worked at previously or currently, but anything that's kind of been a barrier to you.
Yeah, I would say the one reason that I ended up at Nestle is that I started in an industry that really prioritized seniority on straight tenure. And so there was really limited opportunities to accelerate. You kind of grew as you got the years under your belt. And I found that to be a really frustrating environment for me. And I was sort of conflicted about it. I really liked the work, and I thought, well, I'll take a few years in a different industry, get a different kind of experience, and come back. And then I realized when I moved into Nestle world, it was personally, it was just a better match for what I found motivating and engaging. And so that was something that also, when you're in a space that prioritizes tenure, your leadership is also fundamentally inheriting the diversity issues of decades ago. So it's also an environment that won't progress quickly from a diversity and inclusion perspective. But going to somewhere that's very results focused, faster moving, I think was a really positive move for me. Now, at every organization I've been in, especially in communications, there's still a factor of your chemistry with leaders, being a consigliere, as you might say, and really like having a lot of that relationship with leaders being a big part of things. And there will be, and there always will be, leaders who their go-to guy is going to be their go-to guy. And that you can kind of see like, okay, you're never going to be their right hand on something. What's the role you can fill? What's the expertise you can bring? For me, in those environments, that has a timestamp. There's only so long you want to look at roles that aren't really going to be accessible to you, and that truly organization agnostic. I've seen leaders like that in any industry, in any company, but then you find your leaders who either you have more of that kind of shared common viewpoint, you can click in and give them strong counsel, or they're really truly more oriented towards seeking someone who's bringing a different perspective, and they prefer that natural kind of spar in their direct kind of counsel and relationships. So there definitely have been times that I've had to move away from places that I felt like I would hit a ceiling, but there was always kind of the next room to step into, and a leader with whom I felt I could be more valued and have a higher ceiling.
It definitely feels like the industry's moved on a lot. And years ago, it used to be one rule sort of fits all, but now we realize there are so many other nuances within the way people work and what we expect from them. And I think from a lot of the companies that we speak to, people are making smaller changes internally and externally that will make a huge difference in the end. I wondered if you'd been confronted with any kind of gender-related roadblocks in your career to date.
Yeah, I think that because of that sort of cultural similarity point and the mindset, there are places that you might not have the same openness in a conversation that someone is going to have with someone who's exactly like them. If you have a white male leader, they may not be all the way settled, all the way open until they're only surrounded by people who are like them. I mean, I think that's a minority. But it's definitely an environment that you can see. I think that you can sort of feel the difference after that experience of stepping into a room that doesn't function that way, that gets to real kind of candor and directness and wrestling with issues openly, and sort of like I know the previous panelists were talking about kind of team of rivals, like letting ideas fight it out. And so you feel the difference going into that sort of dynamic environment. And that's, I think, where I really turn on and start to thrive as an individual as well. I bring a better self to those spaces. And so when I'm finding environments that feel a little closed, or that they're not surfacing, the real challenges, or they're not engaging in it totally sincerely, you feel the change when you can come into other environments. And usually it goes both ways like that. When you light up more in that environment, that's also what kind of has enabled my growth when I come into an environment that I find dynamic and energizing. Those are also the places that I can really accelerate.
That's fantastic. And something that's really important, actually, I think to all of us women in our industries is the question on how we should support other women in their organizations. because it's kind of, I guess, easy to think about yourself when you're trying to, you know, overcome some of those issues, those roadblockers, those maybe gender-related issues. But in terms of supporting other women inside the organizations, what sort of advice do you have around that, or you know, things that have worked maybe, or views that you have around that?
Yeah, I think there are three things that really stand out to me when I think about that. One is coming with a lot of candor, including in feedback, being willing to give feedback that's growth oriented, not feeling like you should be sugarcoating it. Kind of, because it takes courage to give. It takes courage to take feedback, and it takes courage to give feedback. And I think both women and men who are rising talents are disserved by not being given genuine feedback. So one I would say is to support upcoming talent, and maybe especially young women, is to really give candid feedback and to orient towards growth. The second would be to make it safe for them to give feedback and to flag issues, because I think that in particular, I can say, and I think there's some gender in my lens that makes me afraid of being a complainer. That's something that particularly as a woman in the workplace, that I really don't want to be seen as complaining or dissatisfied. But I think you can really do rising talent, and particularly do women, a service by saying, like, it's okay, let's surface the things that are frustrating, let's attack them. It's not all going to get solved, like you're not going to wave it, but let's talk about it, and we can take a productive mindset to that, and it doesn't make you a complainer, and you don't need to pretend everything's fine until the day you like really lose it and walk out the door. Like, don't do that. Let's surface
when
it
it's too late,
when it's still solvable. And there is a lot of fear, I think, of being a complainer. And then lastly, I would say and that this sometimes is the hardest in practice, because we work in such fast-paced environment that's urgent. You can't take extra time with things, but be willing to give projects that you are going to need to rework together. Yeah. Be willing to give a rising talent a project that's outside their comfort zone, that they will not do well the first time, that you are going to have to work hands-on together. And I think that's one that I would say is something I've particularly focused on for women who maybe sit in other parts of the business and don't necessarily get growth or get recognition where they are, and are looking at where they can go next. I am a lover of the creating a stretch project, of creating something to get somebody outside their day to day. But you really do have to approach it with a mindset that's like, this isn't going to be done as well or as quickly as you gave it to someone who already knew how to do it. What would the point of that be? So it's you have to approach with some patience, and I think that can often be the first thing that goes out the door when you're stretched on a project or a campaign. But it's one that I think is so valuable, and is particularly for anyone who's stuck in one place, is a really helpful avenue to help them keep growing and find other paths that break out of the role that they're in.
That's a really great point, because I think we put pressure on ourselves to be very good at things straight away. And then you start to get the imposter syndrome, where you're sort of sizing yourself up against someone that's perhaps been doing it for longer, or has, you know, more experience in that particular skill set. And so you're right, it sort of pays to maybe encourage a bit of failure, not being great at something straight away, but challenging yourself, and being able to be a bit more flexible and open about the things you're good at and not so great at. So that's really good advice.
And I would say, from your earlier question on kind of like things to work on as a leader, this is a big one for me, because the other thing that I have had to be very intentional about is, when that first version of the project comes back, be willing to say, give narrative direction and say, take another shot, and here are some things to look for, and see this example, as opposed to being like, okay, now watch me redo it and see what I do. So that to me is one, especially if you're, to your point, someone who can tend to be a perfectionist, can tend to have some control factors, being willing to allow for that failure first, without coming in and saving, to give direction and allow like maybe multiple rounds of partial failure, as opposed to that idea of like, okay, you failed, now see how I do it and how it's right, which is also not going to get you to new perspective or new ways of thinking on communications or marketing efforts.
Absolutely. It's another question, actually, is because we see some people that obviously work within a business for a long time, become very successful, and then you get those that kind of move around a bit more. And I guess if you've been in an organization a long time, you're obviously gifted with those skills of knowing the business very, very well. But I wonder if sometimes the change and sort of cultural changes and digital changes and everything else are slightly harder to adapt to, because you've become more institutionalized by the business. And I guess those that kind of move around and probably don't feel like they're so great at one particular thing, because they're trying lots of different businesses, lots of different skill sets, but maybe feel that they're slightly more open to that kind of change because they're having to adapt quite a lot. So it must be quite a challenge actually when you've got teams with very diverse skill sets, and maybe some that have sort of sat in a career for a long time, maybe some that have moved quite a lot, to kind of gel those experiences together and try and get the best out of everyone, and try and get the mindsets in the same place as well when you're trying to evolve their skills.
That's true. I think the learning is a muscle. It's a muscle you have to use, and use it or lose it. And so even if you're in a particular role or type of role for a long time, I think my hope and my challenge to those team members would be still find other ways to really step out of comfort zone, to really step into a learning mode, so that you can build the skills of how to learn and how to adapt, and the humility that comes with that, from remembering what it's like to take something on where you really are figuring it out on the go.
Absolutely. What gets you sort of really excited about being a leader today, in this current climate now?
That's a fun question. I think that some of this is also a cultural tendency that I'm finding the adaptation for. So one thing that's been a cultural adaptation is that Americans are quite informal, and our leadership can be quite informal, which is not always the case for my team members or for different leaders here. But there's something in that movement over time as well, that like leadership itself has become more fundamentally accessible and informal, that I find to surface really great stuff. So being in an environment where your team can give you as a leader constructive feedback, or can bring something, can take their own kind of versions of leadership within the team, you get something really kind of rich and dynamic there. I think that that's really exciting, and it gives everybody a chance to grow in new directions. And so I do really love to see folks grow and stretch and take different perspectives to the next thing they do, but also to sort of break down those barriers on the team, seniority, not just leader and team, but seniority across the team, and start from that idea that everyone can make everyone else's work better, and everyone can give feedback and ideas that are going to be valuable, regardless of level, regardless of expertise. I think that starts to, when that kind of gets everyone using different parts of their brain that are going to make all the work stronger and more agile.
Great. I know this question's been bandied around a bit today, but I do always find it a really interesting question, because you think about it a lot yourself, which is, what advice would you give yourself if you were kind of starting out in the industry?
Oh, I wouldn't have followed it. I would say, fundamentally relax, fundamentally let go of what you see as kind of barriers. So let go of the things outside your control. Let go of, oh, but this really isn't the structure we should be in to accomplish this. Let go of, oh, but this, the resources sit in the wrong places. Like, fundamentally let go of all the things that you feel like are barriers. Don't let those be what you are wrestling with. Put that mental energy towards the things you can control, and so many of the other things will solve themselves along the way. Or they won't, and you'll go somewhere else. Yeah, like have this sort of like fundamental, just like fundamentally let go of that worry, because it's not serving you. And I think that is a really difficult thing for us to allow ourselves to say, like, yeah, lots of stuff suboptimal, don't know where it's gonna go. Focus, let me focus on my bites as I go, and on what I can really drive impact on, and think a little differently about that. but that's really difficult. I don't think my younger self would have been able to do that, and it's still something that I'm pushing my current self on all the time. But it's something that would have made the last 15 years better for me personally. It's a better, like, more mentally healthy, and brought me better well-being, as well as probably, I think, freed up more room to do the parts of my job that I love.
You've really resonated with me there. I think it's so easy to get completely focused on things out of your control and waste a lot of time and energy on them. And even reminding yourself, even at the stage of the career you are now, to kind of let those go and just work on the things that can be improved. That's such a good piece of advice. And then another question I have really is around, what do you think in terms of in the workplaces as women, diversity, etc., what can we do as individuals? How can we be better individuals, do you think?
That's a really good question. I think that a lot of it comes from seeking out and actively promoting something that, like, runs counter to your own. So, like, I'm a very strong extrovert. I like to operate in real time. I've had to be really conscious to make room for introverts on the team to be able to go away and do their thinking and bring back, as opposed to always expecting everyone to operate how I operate, and to not think of the way I operate as inherently what I want people to move towards. Not giving feedback that's like, oh yes, be more like me, but rather create an environment that you can really be your best in either scenario. But I think that really extends outside kind of those classic, like, work mode operations, introvert, extrovert, what have you, and really goes into much different backgrounds, having come up in much different cultures, on how you're supposed to express yourself, or how you've been encouraged to express yourself in other environments. And so every time, and of course we're getting into, like, performance review season, every time I'm writing feedback or challenges, either as a 360 or for my own team, I try to really, everything I write, reread and think, would this actually take away something that this person has that's valuable? If I'm am I telling them to be more like me? Am I telling them to be more like a Nestle Classic person? You know, am I trying to take away something that they bring that's unique and move them more to the mainstream, or am I giving them feedback that's actually going to strengthen what they already bring? And I think that's something, when we talk about some of the ideas around, like, imposter syndrome and that sort of thing, I think a lot of it comes from us, even when we're trying to be a diverse and inclusive workplace, giving feedback that's, like, fundamental. Like, I've brought you in for a different perspective, and I know you're going to be really, like, bringing something of value, and also please change everything about yourself to better reflect your very generic peers. And so I think, like, taking that challenge to all of the feedback you give and all of the way you evaluate talent is a really important and difficult, like, uncomfortable step.
It's really, really important, actually. And I myself did some training where you realize they did color coded training, and you realize you're a certain type of color, but you perhaps weren't being generous or open-minded enough to accept other people's colors. And as in, we were coded red if you were a bit of an extrovert, or blue if you're an introvert, and some people like detail, but actually just, really accepting people for working in a different way and having different, approaches to projects is so important. And we talk about it a lot as an organization, but it's really down to us as individuals to be able to, be like that ourselves, be very open-minded and adapt and change, and then obviously help the business to evolve. But that's really helpful and great to hear.
I'm hopeful we can get better at it. It really is a hard muscle to break.
Absolutely. But it's your two last points are so important to sort of, for all of us to remind ourselves, the way we conduct ourselves in the business. I think we might be coming to the end of our time. So I just wanted to ask if you had any sort of last thoughts on the industry, or anything that, you wanted to share with us before we wrap up the session.
Yeah, I was in another conversation this week about, like, inside out purpose communications, like kind of opening the veil on your company or your brand and really showing from the inside out. And one of the questions was about what's your approach for internal activists and the employees or the team members who really push and challenge and don't think you're going far enough? And there is something really special about embracing that, both in ourselves and for our teams, about being willing to be someone who is annoying about the push for progress. So I think that's something I would leave with, is where can we all go kind of a step farther in a push for progress, have a little bit more of a direct challenge to a status quo that needs to be challenged, and where can we actually like reward and make safe our teams to do that? Where can we say, challenge me as a leader, call out the places that I'm not doing right by you, or that I'm not making an inclusive environment enough of a priority for us. So I think that was one that really stuck with me, because it often is, I've seen leaders get rattled by it, because it's sort of a new cultural world where an employee feels comfortable telling the C-suite this isn't good enough. But it also is kind of an amazing effect. And I've seen leaders really transform and take much more decisive action based on that feedback. So that's something that excites me as a trend in talent and culture and kind of a broader cultural movement. And it's something that I think today we can kind of take away and take a little like fire in our bellies on, which is a very Americanism, but to get that extra oomph to bring a challenge to our leaders, to be willing to say that where we are right now from an inclusion perspective, whether it's racial equity, whether it's women in leadership, is not acceptable, and is something we need to make much faster progress on, because I think leaders are affected by hearing that, and then we can see how that makes their movement faster, even if it's still not fast enough.
That's great. What a great way to end the session. It's very inspirational. So thank you so much for inspiring me and everyone else, I'm sure, that's been listening. And it's really great to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Samantha.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
both.
Liz.
Thank you both so much for joining. So many great insights there, Liz. I love that advice and encouraging employees to challenge the C-suite and to really push things, because obviously the change will come from within. And we've seen a lot of brands pushing to be more inclusive and, in their work externally. But I love also, it's just as important to be happening internally and to, encourage and make space for those places, for those conversations. I think that's definitely a good place to start. Excellent. I loved your conversation. Thank you both so much for being here. We really loved having you, and we hope that we'll see you both back on our stage again soon. And thanks to all our sponsors and to our viewers at home. Be sure to check out our website and learn more about our upcoming events.